Hi students. This is a short video to be able to cover some information for you. I have sent a message in Slack that you can read above because I'm attaching this video to the post. But basically, about 2/3 of the way through every class, we have a next steps meeting with the students. And the purpose of that meeting is to be able to explain what happens once you're done with the class that you're currently taking, just to make sure that you're clear on deadlines and understand how to get from the class you're in to the class that you want to take after. So I'm doing this little slideshow as a visual audio guide and a shortcut because sometimes reading a whole bunch of text is really exhausting, but the post does have all of the dates and details that you need as well too. So watch the video or keep an eye on that pinned post that's in your channel, whichever is easiest for you. Regardless, let's go ahead and jump in. The first thing I want to highlight are your requirements to graduate. So your pilot class is exactly like the 15-week class that was running this term as well too. You were just on a tighter schedule. You do have the same requirements. So you do want to make sure that you don't have any missing assignments, that you've completed all of the lesson assignments for all 11 weeks. You want to make sure that you turn in your completed final project work by the end of the last day of class. Your all's class ends on February 10th. You also will need to take both of the required technical assessments that we have all intro students take. You have a 2-week window to do that in, February 4th to the 17th, and I'll share more details about those assessments both as it gets closer and a little bit later in this video as well too. So those are the requirements to graduate. Just make sure that you have those in mind and that that's what you're working on completing. You don't need to do any kind of new pre-work assignments. You don't have to reapply through the program the way you applied to get into intro. None of that's needed. Just complete your course, everything that's required of it, and then you'll be able to move on to your next class without any additional work provings or things of that variety. Okay, I have the calendar up here so that way we can take a look together what this is going to look like. Your week 10 begins on January 28th, and that's when I'll start having the access to your sample assessments available. So the assessments I was talking about, there are two that are required. One is a couple of coding challenges that you'll need to complete. One is multiple choice, where they might give you an example of some JavaScript snippet or talk a little bit about some HTML code, and you have to pick one of the best multiple choice answers. So you have a coding challenge and a multiple choice assessment that are required. Before you get to those, then I go ahead and provide this sample assessment, which has both rolled into one. I think I have about 4 or 5 multiple choice questions on it and one coding challenge on there. But it doesn't matter if you take the sample assessment or not. It's just for you to be able to get comfortable with the tool we're using, see how it works, understand what's being asked of you for the assessments that you do have to take to complete the course. So it's just a nice little like playground area for you to be able to see what's going on with these assessments. What do they look like? How do they work? So I'll start having that available to you beginning on January 28th when your week 10 starts. And you can access that sample assessment anytime you want between the time I post it and the end of class. All right. So to recap, week 10 to-dos. If you haven't considered what class to take next, start checking out what your options are. You can visit codethedream.org/course-descriptions, or if you just go to codethedream.org from the Learn section, select course descriptions. It'll help outline the two pathways that you have. You have two alternatives, two options available to you. You can either follow the Python data engineering data analysis track, where you would start learning the language of Python and work with data visualizations and web scraping in your Python Essentials class. Or you can take the React class, which is JavaScript based. So you would still be coding and writing in JavaScript, and you would be working on building a front end using the React framework. So you've made a simple website in your intro class. React allows you to add a little bit of more complexity to a JavaScript site. So that class teaches you all of that information. So if you have questions about it, feel free to reach out to mentors, reach out to your cohort leader or myself, talk to friends about, what parts of your class have you liked? What parts are you interested in? That kind of a thing to do your homework and figure out what you'd like to do next. But those are your two options, either Python Essentials, which is the next step in the Python data track, or React, which is the next step in the JavaScript web developer track. Take a look at the sample assessment when it's posted in the Intro 26 Pilot Slack channel for details and play around with it. Those are your only week 10 to-dos. All right, so now let's take a look at week 11. That's going to run February 4th to February 10th. Week 11 is your last week of class. You can begin taking the official assessments, the coding challenge and the multiple choice assessments that are required for your graduation. You can begin taking those as soon as February 4th. They are available for 2 weeks. So you can take them during the last week of class, or if you'd rather wait until your final project work is turned in and the class is behind you and focus on them from the 11th to the 17th, you can do that. But the last week of class is February 4th to February 10th. Make sure your final project is all turned in by that last day of class. You'll turn in your final project using the same assignment submission form you've been using, but there'll be some additional questions. So when you go to turn in lesson 11, you'll submit the link to your work for your final project. You'll do a short little demo video that walks through your work. Why do we ask you to do this video demo? It's important for you to start getting comfortable with talking about what you've built because you'll have to explain what you've built, how you've built it when you're in technical interviews or just general job interviews in the industry. So we want you to start getting comfortable to talk about, hey, look at this cool thing I built. This is how I built it. So the project work, the video, and then on that same form, you'll also have some questions to let us know, do you want to take React or do you want to take Python? So just indicate on that form which you'd like to take, so that way I know the correct information to send you when you have advanced and get to move on to your next class. All right, that covers our week 11. So to recap, turn in your final project work with your demo video using that lesson 11 assignment submission form. Make sure that you've selected what class you want to take next in that form. If you haven't looked at your sample assessment to play around with what assessments look like, it's a good idea to do that if you have a little bit of time during week 11. And if you have time or want to take either or both of the actual assessments, the coding challenge and the multiple choice that you need to take, feel free to do so during week 11 if you want to, but you will have the week after class to take it too. Okay, speaking of the week after class, here we are at the post-class week. This is February 11th to February 17th. You will have already turned in your final project by the time of this week because your last day class was the 10th, so everything needs to be turned in then. But from the 11th to the 17th, you'll be able to take those 2 assessments if you haven't by that point and turn those in. The details on the assessments will be included in Slack posts in your class channel. But in general, you have several hours to complete either 3 or 4 coding challenges. A coding challenge is usually you're either given some starter code and described to do something to that starter code to be able to make it do something different, or you're given a scenario and you need to create the code that performs that scenario. Sometimes it's things like, here's an array of data, arrange it alphabetically, or arrange it reverse alphabetically. It might be, here's a site that has an input field, build something that checks to make sure that the user hasn't put in something other than numerical data, for example. So small coding challenges that don't require you to build anything big, but you will have to actually put your code into practice in those coding challenges. And then the multiple choice assessment, you have about an hour for. It's only about 20 or 25 multiple choice questions. You can skip around, but make sure that you answer all of your questions and just go through and answer as best as you can. Like I said, there'll be more details coming in the Slack channel, so that way you can see the full information about these assessments and get a clear handle on it. But this gives you a quick overview, so that way you have an idea of what's coming down the pike. All right, so those post-class week to-dos after you've turned in your final project on February 10th is just if you have not taken either or both of your technical assessments, do those during that week and check that Intro 26 Pilot Slack channel. Reed and I will be posting our schedules. We'd like to meet with you all after all of your assessments and final projects and everything are said and done. We'd like to meet with you just to be able to get a student's perspective on how the course worked. These are the most condensed classes we've ever done within our program. So we want to make sure what the pacing is like from a student perspective, as well as to make sure that we've gauged the difficulty level well. So bring your open and honest feedback. We want to hear whether it was a good, bad, or indifferent experience for you, as far as the resources that you had available in the curriculum, the pacing of the class, how it felt week to week on getting the work done, all of those details. Feel free to share that and anything else you want to with us about how your pilot class ran. All right. So then our second post-class week is when those meetings with Reader I would happen. So from the 18th to the 24th is when our schedules will be open, and you can schedule with us at any point in time that you'd like. We'll probably have about 15 to 30-minute window blocks open, but if you need or want more time, then we can adjust that as needed. All right. So as a reminder, second post-class week to-dos is going to be scheduled 15 to 30-minute appointment with Reed or myself to share your input on the class. And then on February 24th is when I'll be emailing out registration details, both for people who are known graduates moving on to spring classes, people who are approved retakers that will be taking classes in the spring, or new applicants who will be joining our program for the first time in the spring. So on February 24th, check your inbox, check your spam or trash folders in case it got filtered, but you should have a message on February 24th with registration and orientation details for your spring class. If you do have any questions, feel free to reach out to myself or your cohort leader at any point, so that way we can help clarify anything. If you have questions of a technical nature about should I take React or Python next, then feel free to reach out to your cohort leaders or your mentors. They always have great lived in advice as far as they've already experienced some of those technologies and can give you some ins and outs as far as how all of those things work and maybe what might be a good next step for you. So as a reminder, you don't need to reapply or complete any pre-work tasks for your next class the way you did to get into this class. You do need to successfully complete your final project work and take those 2 required assessments. The scores on your assessments do not matter. The reason we have intro students take the assessments is just so you can get exposure to it, because in a technical interview, you will likely be given some kind of a coding challenge or similar that you'll need to work through. So we want this to be the first time you're seeing it, not when you're interviewing for a job. So for that reason, that's why we have those 2 required assessments. Be sure to take those, turn in your final project, make sure your lessons are turned in, and then on February 24th, check your email to be able to register for your next class. Dates and information for spring. The spring classes will begin their week 1 full into swing, starting technical work assignments on April 1st. The week before that, which is March 25th to the 31st, is going to be your week 0, just like you had in this class. So you do have a prep week before the class officially starts with any technical work for you to be able to check in with your cohort leader, make sure your environment's all set up however you need to, preview anything that you want to take a look at, and just make sure you have access to all of your tools and everything. 2 weeks before class starts, which will be March 18th to the 24th, is when we'll be scheduling those student orientations. Your email on February 24th with all of your registration details will have those dates and times. We are still finalizing those as of this recording, but from March 18th to 24th, somewhere in that week window, expect to have a student orientation for whatever class you wind up taking with us next. Thank you so much for watching. Sorry it was a little bit of a longer video, but I hope it's helpful for you all. And as always, reach out to your cohort leader or myself on Slack if you have any questions. Thanks, everybody.